Hello, everyone. Welcome to Weekends with Amit. Today, we are going to discuss about two very important things: abundance and power. Whenever these two words are uttered, there is often a negative connotation attached to it. Is abundance all about money? Is power all about dominating others? Or there is more to that? We are going to learn about this from Let us welcome Professor Amit Goswami Ph.D. and Dr. Valentina Onisor MD. A very warm welcome to the show. As I was talking to our audience, that we are going to know if there is more to abundance and power than what meets the eye. And let us learn it directly from first Professor Goswami.
Thank you, Krishanu. Well, this is a very important topic we are at, especially here in the West. History is showing me that uh, even the archetype of abundance, the archetypal nature of abundance, of making money, has never been much discussed. It's amazing. I mean, I was having a correspondence with an economist recently, and uh, from the correspondence, it's not obvious that he was not even aware that making money has something to do with archetypes of consciousness, personal growth, spirituality. This is the condition we have degenerated into. It was not always like this, because if you look at the collective unconscious, we get a completely different story. In the collective unconscious, archetypes have been represented initially by gods and goddesses. And Jung discovered that even in the mental age, people have been putting new form to the archetype of power, even in the West. And in the East, of course, especially in India, they continue to think of archetypes in terms of gods and goddesses. But the meaning, archetypal meaning of gods and goddesses has become quite obscure. Now, I'm not glamorizing the present situation for any country or culture. It's all the same, very confused. So, can we make any sense out of it by starting a discussion on the archetypal nature of anything that humans do that has ended up in our professions? If you look at the base level human condition, which is me centeredness, which is negative emotional brain circuits, which is also the pleasure circuits. We have introduced this before. You must be familiar by now if you come to our show. Now, those things don't talk about archetype, do they? They are about our basic security. So, this is the thing. Maslow discovered that until the security needs of a human being is finished, a human being just don't have the capacity of turning to his or her higher needs. This is the first problem. Now, security leads us to eventually making money. Of course, initially in the human journey, money was not there. Concept of money came later, but as soon as it came, we talk about wealth in terms of making money and measure it also how much money do you have. Common. But of course, we also notice, a few people at least notice, that making money is not exactly bringing them what they hoped for. It neither brings them satiation, never gives them the feeling I have enough, I can now stop making money and attend to other things. That never happens. This is why we find billionaires as greedy for money, as eager to evade paying taxes as ordinary people. Everybody has to forced to part with their security. Money, we hold on. We're not ready to give up security. And if you ask even the so-called enlightened people today, they're not like older renunciates used to be. They really did not care for money much, did not care for possessions much. But now they do. They make money by huge amounts. So what has happened to these investigations, explorations that are the main drives of people? If we look at human history, indeed, initially there is only this struggle for making money, security in the form of archetype of abundance, and power. Power to dominate over others mainly, because that's how you show your power. Initially, the power is all about muscles. Might is right. But then, of course, when meaning processing came about with the advent of agricultural societies, we discovered that meaning is power. Codified it much later. The phrase meaning is power came from Francis Bacon in the 18th century, not much later, 17th, 18th century, but the idea has been there with us since the beginning of the agricultural age. Pen is also mighty. Some people even say pen is mightier than the sword. All right, so power has been generalized to invoke meaning, and as soon as that happens, you get into archetypes pretty soon, because the highest meanings come from the archetypes. So eventually, we find in cultures like India, especially, where the culture is the most ancient, in spiritual terms, Egyptian culture is older, they say, historical terms. The Mesopotamian culture is even older, some people say. But as far as the archetypes are concerned, as far as consciousness is concerned, India has a continuous 7,000-year-old history of exploration of these things. So we profit much by always coming back to the Indian context, which we have to just, something that we have to accept. Even Westerners who are used to think of themselves as East-West separate, they just refuse to think like Easterners. They are mystical, etc. But of course, you who are listening to this show don't believe that. I hope. If you do believe that, please eradicate that belief. It's the most limiting belief, one of the most limiting beliefs that you can have. Just like the limiting belief that everything is for security. There is no such thing as higher need. And of course, that belief continues. I mean, Maslow's idea came in the 1960s, but even after more than 6 decades, that idea continues. In many people's behavior, you will see that only the lower needs, security needs, are addressed. So money drives the archetype of abundance. Power is driven by the negative emotions of domination. Greed drives businesses. Domination drives politicians. Look at the political scene anywhere, you will find this. How do we discover? How do we discover that there are more? How to discover the archetypal nature if we don't have a spiritual tradition like India? In India, it is fairly easy. Of course, I'm not saying that, as I said, Indians are as confused as everybody else about these things today. But you know, it's there with us. It's there with us everywhere. In the West, it went underground because the religions, Christianity became power-hungry religion back when we had Dark Ages. That's what produced the Dark Ages, by the way. And then these archetypal searches had to go underground. But it's still alive. Alive in what form? Alive in the form of mythology in the form of things that you hear and demean, like alchemy, to the people who don't understand the mythological meaning of alchemy. For them, alchemy is all meaningless search for making, finding that mythical touchstone which will convert base metal into gold. No, base metal is us. Base metal is the human condition, the base level human condition. And alchemy is about transforming that base level human condition with the help of archetypes. That's what alchemy is about. But it went underground and helped only those who are capable of awakening their archetypal potentialities and cater to their higher needs. This is the history. And of course, mythology expressed itself in other ways too, and that too has been discovered. Jung discovered how the archetypes came alive in the collective unconscious. Modern archetypes, he discovered all the archetypes that the modern people use for the exploration of power. These are called the Jungian archetypes of the self, 12 of them. We'll discuss it next week. It gives us what in mythology is called hero's journey. You must have heard the phrase hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, made it famous. Today, people use the word hero's journey kind of cavalierly without understanding. But with quantum science, we can completely understand it. And they will see that it's a very powerful methodology that lays out the creative paths of transforming the exploration of power into an archetypal exploration, eventually going into the highest transformation human beings are capable of. You can start with any archetype and reach there. Abundance, that archetype is not studied much in the West, as I said, very lost in the archetype of power. Very interesting. And yet, the basic awareness of power, if you look at the Greek goddesses, you don't find much in the form of archetype of abundance, agreed, but you do find an archetype, an archetypal goddess, Athena, which is all about higher needs. And then there is the god, Hermes, very interesting. Hermes is the basis, the origin of the subject of hermeneutics, you may have heard of it, which is really the equivalent of exploration of archetypes that we call in quantum science. So West has been doing these things, except they're underground. Very few people know about them. This is the problem. In the East, until very recently, in India especially, until very recently, until the end of middle of 20th century, the archetypes have been very much alive in terms of the Indian culture, because Indian culture never went to monotheism, which is forget the gods and goddesses, there's only one God. They're more or less accepting that gods and goddesses in human-like pictures is all that you have, and that's not good. Let's make one human-like picture, the great almighty God, super duper, most powerful that you can think of, but still modeled after human. Completely forget that the spiritual tradition said the opposite thing. God tries to make humans in his or her image. What we have done is we have made the image of God in our terms, what we see. as the epitome. So God is supposed to be this most powerful. You know what image that fits in? That fits in the Greek image of Greek god Zeus. Zeus, who is really not even an archetypal god, he is a god of nature, god of lightning and thunder. So this is the problem that the socio-culturally, the emphasis, if it is on the archetype of power, and if we miss the archetype of abundance, we never even come to the archetype of love and goodness. And we ignore the archetype of beauty, completely transform the archetype into those explorations that will give us entertainment. This is the way we have demeaned the archetypes. Especially notice that the negative emotions dominate our archetypal exploration at the base level when we are only concerned with security. But let's not entirely put ignorance on the Western mind. That mindset, don't forget, also has produced beautiful mythology in terms of the possibility of transformation of the archetype of power via romance. Who hasn't heard of the mythology of Beauty and the Beast? Do you see the analogy? Valentina just coined a beautiful phrase. I'm stealing it from you, Valentina. You could have told it yourself, but you expressed it to me, so I'll say it. It's beautiful. When I talk about hero's journey, she said, well, behind every hero there is a she. Without the she, hero would be zero. It's true. And it is expressed in mythology like Sleeping Beauty. The female, which is naturally the expression of archetype of beauty, the female, that archetype of beauty, sleeps ordinarily because it has not awakened its power. So who comes to rescue? It's the Prince Charming, who then has the key, which is this touch of this little stick, and he touches it to the eyes of the Sleeping Beauty, and the Sleeping Beauty wakes up her power. Valentina will tell you what the message is in terms of chakra psychology. It's beautiful. And the opposite is, just as the Prince Charming wakes up the power of the female partner, similarly, the female partner, on her turn, she transforms the negative emotion, the beast, in the prince. That's the mythology of Beauty and the Beast. How beautiful it is, right? And that too was discovered by Carl Jung as the archetype of anima and animus. Anima is the suppressed female in the male, and animus is the suppressed male in the female, and we can help each other holding hands, not like this. This is the interaction that people do when they're into archetype of power in the domination way. The female and the male both today. And they can never really recognize the archetypal nature of the relationship. But you realize the archetypal nature, then you never do this. David Hawkins wrote a beautiful book called Power versus Force. This is not power. This is force. This is the Newtonian version of how changes come with force. But you know, in quantum, how changes come? Quantum physics is all about possibilities and choice. In quantum physics, it comes from choice. So how do I change you? How does the female change the beast in male? not by force. Female doesn't have it. How can she use force? No, she does by persuasion. Change the other by convincing her through her behavior, to presenting the fact that, look, I love you, although you try to dominate me, and still I love you. This is why even if you have abused your partner, which many males tend to do, even then the partner doesn't leave. It's not entirely due to the helplessness of the partner, but the fact that love continues to try to transform, to try to convince the other, look, there is a better way. All right? And this is the possibility, this is the potentiality that we can all wake up to. Can it be done even better? Yes, it can be done even better by invoking the higher archetypes. There's a whole pantheon of gods in the Hindu tradition, Indian tradition, to show that, yes, it's possible to completely negate the negatives and transcend both negative and positive. So let's hear Valentina. She has much to say on the feminine side, and that side is extremely important for this discussion. How to transform archetypes of abundance and power to their archetypal nature, to their transpersonal nature. Valentina?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And it is a beautiful, another mysterious subject, because again, these terms and what we see usually, it's not the archetypal meaning, right? So first of all, people have to understand what actually mean archetypes, yeah, and also what means in the same time a life of meaning and purpose, and that means also remembering and eventually following your dharma. And remember last week we had the webinar about vitality. So vitality is very much related with the discussion today, because also we see even in the Christian tradition, for example, people again usually are very much afraid of this vitality, afraid also of the sexual power, afraid of having power, afraid of having money, So if you see in churches and in other spiritual schools, it's like you have to live in poverty in order to express yourself as a spiritual person. So it's so much misunderstanding, and it's the mystery of life lying there also. Because again, you hear words like the power. When you hear power, it's not just the power of economics, the power of the politicians, it's not just the power of manipulation. You hear also the power of healing, power of love, the power of the heart, which can really be like an atomic bomb, the power of polarity in a polar couple relationship, especially, speaking of what Amit has mentioned, and about awakening all these potentials. Everything, this, what we talk about, is the basis of awakening of our potential that otherwise is asleep. Described, maybe you heard, most of you, about Kundalini, another mystery of Kundalini, which is described like a sleeping serpent at the basis of the spine, and how that awakens. Now it's a question. And then especially those, I think everybody, most of the people here are aware about what is called the science of manifestation. Now, because again, in order to manifest in your life this abundance that otherwise truly exists around us, even if, especially nowadays, you seem to see only the other thing, so you see a lot of poverty, you see disease, you see lack of love, you can see all these things. So it's very interesting about from which point of view we are seeing the things. And obviously, like again, if you are able to live a coherent life full of meaning, then you are also attracting that state of health at various levels in our being, and the state of coherence from where you see the things as they really are, not what you make them to be. Yeah. And obviously, again, speaking of science of manifestation, it is important to also see the blockages that we have in our path, whether they are inner blockages, and this would be most interesting to look upon, because when we work with these inner blockages, also the outer blockages are differently seen, and you can deal with them different. Not that they don't exist, not that we are not in Kali Yuga, because we are, but in reality, we really live in an abundant world, and this, when I say that, an abundant world where we really have access to all this archetypal world is just there in front of us, but we have access to this all the time, not so much maybe, or maybe it's in periods, sometimes yes, more or less, sometimes not, but there is really an abundance of resources, an abundance of ideas. All these other levels of our beings exist. We are not just the physical body. So this abundance, which can manifest from the supramental level, as intuitions, as insights, all kind of opportunities, possibilities, they exist. It seems still that as if as a collective race, that we are all the time moving from a deeply rooted sense of scarcity, a deep sense of lack. It's very interesting, and it seems still important that we understand why this is the case, and how we can, as individuals, to reassess the situation and learn to transcend this paradigm of scarcity in the hope of engendering a world characterized by an all-pervasive equality of abundance, both within and without. And who's going to do it if not all of us? Because scarcity is, in essence, the fusion, if you want, of our natural survival inclination with the process of our thoughts as well. So when we are in a development stage, however many years ago, when humans were in the development stage, it was of course necessary to perceive in terms of scarcity, because the implements in deriving sources were nowhere near as advanced as they are today. So we come to evolve in this way. But where we are now, for example, think of fear. Fear obviously means that when you are fixed on negatively impactful future events, based on negatively impactful events that maybe happened to you in the past, and it's the foundation of this quality of scarcity. And the fear, it's only dissolving when we move towards true abundance. Obviously, when you have even more love in your life, for example, because the opposite of love is fear. Now, all right, it's a lot to talk even in terms of chakras, if you want. Obviously, when you say abundance, you refer, again, I sent you to the webinar that we did last week, to vitality also, and with abundance, we think, first of all, the Muladhara chakra, if you want, the basis chakra, which needs to be very stable. Nowadays, it is said, and I can see that also, that kind of the level of consciousness of humanity is mainly at the level of the first two chakras, which means that Muladhara chakra and Svadhisthana chakra. And that is why we are so easily to be manipulated, because again, it's all about survival, Muladhara chakra, and all about not understanding sexual energy, perverted sexual energy, perverted conceiving about this wonderful energy, which can be really, as I said, as an atomic bomb, a bomb of transformation there. It can be an engine of evolution if it is well understood and in a couple relationship that is based on love. But again, being there, we don't even have the chance to collapse these energies at the first two levels into the first place when we speak about collapsing energy at the level of Manipura chakra. And that is where, again, the manifestation of power comes in place, because Manipura chakra is also the place where the ego resides. And our next discussion, of course, it's again about the ego, which is something which again is not so well understood, if anything. And what we do in quantum science, we speak about quantum spirituality. And the idea of quantum spirituality is to learn to shift that traditional practice in the spiritual traditions of only having the emphasis on the self archetype and just withdrawing from the world, and killing the ego, and instead focus on an archetype, whatever is your archetype of your choice in this life, preferably on the path of your dharma, your personal dharma, and eventually learn to take quantum leaps and make gradually shifting in your character. Yeah, so it's not about killing that ego, but really using it for your growth. And some people, yeah, the spiritual people in the spiritual school, so-called like that, they say, yeah, this is not, it's, it's not, cannot be true, because again, ego also, it's a big question there. And again, eventually on quantum spirituality, to speak about concentrating on the archetype of wholeness, which is integrating all the dichotomies, both universal and archetypal, and develop in this way a strong, healthy, authentic ego, not a strong egotistic ego. It doesn't mean the negative emotion brain circuits will not go away, but this ego will never use them for its own benefit. Like, it will not manipulate others, displaying tantrums and all these things for the ego's purpose. An authentic ego would not do that. And then again, the next thing is that the transformation is to be done on stages, and the reward system needs to be kept. Is there, the brain is reacting with rewards or negative or punishment system, and what we describe is about increasing happiness to even satisfy these rewards brain circuits. Is nothing bad. Even happiness is not something to kick out of our life, to just be serious faces. Because speaking of that, like when you live in a contracted state of consciousness, an ego dominated life, that means also that you're very, very serious. Humbleness is not there. And actually, humbleness is the mark of a person who really has that authenticity and that healthy state of power. Also, a person who has this power, which is healthy, is having the power in order to empower others. We have, speaking of archetypes, in the Hindu tradition, we have Durga, which is the symbol for that, again, in empowered love, if you want. And the fact is that the world needs such transformed people. And then eventually, after you have enough of really embodying this archetype for the world right now, especially, then you will go naturally for the self archetype. But it's not that you have to run for the self archetype, or you call it self archetype, and just run in a cave and hide, because you're not able to cope with your negative emotional brain circuits or with whatever happens in the world. And that is why the next week, I think you will love that we will talk about the hero's journey. And again, learning what to do exactly in these moments that we are now, and where this kind of journey is more needed than ever. So that's a few words. Amit?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, but when I was listening, I could figure out a number of things which are of further importance, which creates intrigue. And I'd like to take this opportunity to address our viewers on this subject. That as we go deeper into these subjects, we'll find intrigue. And these are not just subjects to talk about in a half an hour or 45 minutes discussion. They are far deeper than that. They are far more significant than that. And for this, we have a full degree course, master's degree and PhD degree, which we are giving in collaboration with a university in India, Jaipur. You can find all about it on our website, www.amitgoswami.org, or you can email us at info@amitgoswami.org. Along with the master's and PhD degrees, we also have 1-year certification courses, and a 10 days workshop is coming up in Jaipur, India. If you are interested, do visit the website. Now, coming to Professor Goswami for a short wrap up before we end today's session.
Thank you, Krishanu. Okay, so let's emphasize the most important things we have said so far. The most important thing for you to take away from this half an hour of webinar are these two. Satisfaction can never be achieved by catering to only the survival needs. Survival needs are important, but as soon as you have enough survival, it's time to cater to the higher needs. Higher needs for human beings consist of exploration of meaning, And as soon as you start exploring meaning, then you will notice that all the non-trivial new meanings have archetypal origin. They set the new context of meaning that are relevant to us. This is why, in a simple way, we think of the archetypes as human values. Traditionally, these archetypes have been the basis of our creative investigations, which eventually give rise to professions. From the beginning of history, we have professional artists who produce embodiments of the archetype of beauty, which people found entertaining, which is an essential component of even survival. But of course, artists don't do it for only making money out of selling their art. They do it for the joy, satisfaction that the creative activity, creative exploration of beauty brings them. Similarly, but unfortunately, not similarly in every respect, but similarly only in the respect of the security part, people have investigated abundance and power, but only investigated them to increase personal security, personal power. However, money you can make will never satisfy you. What can satisfy you is to develop within yourself a sense of abundance. This is why wealth, archetypally speaking, is an investigation of abundance. When you explore abundance and seek abundance, then there will be a point where wealth will satisfy you. How do you know that you have reached that point? At that point, you will find that you don't mind. In fact, your objective has become sharing your abundance with others. Really, believe it. This is the meaning of mythological stories that we still like, but only in Christmas time. The story of Scrooge being transformed to learn to give. That is a real story, you know. That's real story of every human life. We have to learn that. We have to learn that I will never get satisfaction by accumulating wealth like King Midas did, like Scrooge did initially. But then when we learn to share, it all becomes beautiful. Today, business and economics are in a dire condition. You know why? Because we have forgotten completely the fact that at some point we have to learn to empower others to make money. This is what the objective of economics in the form of capitalism is. Now it is much misunderstood. Abundance has been given up. Instead, wealth is used only for entertainment and some of it even for the exploring the archetype of power in the form of personal power. Power also likewise has to be transformed with love, sharing it with others. What is the story of Sleeping Prince that I alluded to before? It's the prince empowering the princess. And empowering the princess, how? Because the princess, he intuited, will transform him, bring him to love. As we engage in relationships, we wake up each other's latent, hidden potentialities. And that's the secret of manifestation of human intention, our highest desires that changes our life. Learn to live this way. Enough is enough. We have seen the other side of it. That is the job of materialism, if you take it that way, and they have done a good job. They have shown how to degrade civilization by making archetypes only pretends. Human values only pretend values. They're not pretends, they're very real. Only thing is that you have to give up the fear to explore them. Give up the fear to transform ourselves. Give up the negative emotions and engage these archetypes in our life to live a life of love, satisfaction, wholeness, and all those good things that Valentina mentioned. Are you ready? Are you ready to begin a new way? Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here on the show today. And we thank our audience to be there for us. Keep asking us questions. We love to answer you. See you next week with a brand new topic. Till then.